Hello, I'm Rixie with Collector's Maze. Today I'm joined by Lisle Wilkerson. Lisle is a third culture kid who grew up in Japan. She's the voice of Nina Williams and Christy Monteiro from the Tekken video game franchise, as well as the voice of Sarah Bryant from Virtua Fighter. She's appeared in Sofia Coppola's award-winning film Lost in Translation and starred in the 2006 award-winning indie film Kamataki. She's a host of the Blonde Geisha podcast series and has tons of voiceover credits. Lisle, welcome to the maze.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rixie. It's good to see you. I have my morning coffee with me,
nice,
so I'm ready to go.
So I've got mine as well. Of course, it's almost afternoon here. Well, actually, it technically is afternoon here. So I'm in the Midwest. You're West Coast, right?
Correct. Los Angeles. Yep.
Los Angeles. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm in just outside of Kansas City, and
okay.
I know you've been. I caught that you've been, and I want to talk about that later because I've got some questions on that. I was like, I've got to hear that story. But so I mean, first of all, how's the day going? I mean, you mentioned jet lag, so you've been running around everywhere.
Yes. I just got back from a 3-week trip, work trip to Tokyo, and coming back is always really brutal with the jet lag. So I don't know why, but going there, it's not so bad. You wake up at like 4:35 in the morning, and I don't know. I think I'm the most productive person I can be when I'm in Tokyo because I wake up super early and then I go to bed normally and I'm totally fine. But then I come back to LA and it's like, blah. I can't, it's just crazy.
What is the
so
time
I've been back
difference?
for 3 days, but 17 hours, I think.
Oh yeah, that would be brutal. That would be brutal. Yeah. Very cool.
It's all good. It's okay.
So I want to start. I mean, third culture kid. I want you to unpack that. I mean, I have a pretty good idea what that is. I'm sure people tuning in may not. So you were born in Japan, but you didn't grow up there, or no, you weren't born in Japan, but you grew up there. I had that backwards. So you grew up in Japan, but weren't born there.
Correct. I was born here in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
Both my parents were also born and raised in West Virginia. And then I moved to Tokyo when I was 5 with my family, of course, and lived there for pretty much off and on for 28 years, almost 30 years. So a third culture kid is, I like to call it this kind of phenomenon. It's not really a phenomenon, but basically I think there are a lot of people out there like this where your parents are from one culture, but you grow up in another culture. And so you use those two cultures and you really kind of create your own hodgepodge of a culture. And that is definitely me. I'm very much a crazy mix of, two cultures. Yeah.
So it's a hybrid culture that's been created by the exposure to two different cultures. I mean, so you have a little of both. Are you?
Yeah.
I mean, spending more time in Japan, are you a little more, in Japanese culture, or are you still more Western? I mean, where do you lie?
Well, I think that's the whole thing about. I feel like with third culture kids, they're never fully comfortable in one culture because, I mean, obviously I don't look Japanese. So even though I definitely am, very accustomed to Japan, but, it's all day, every day. It's like, oh, gaijin, foreigner, that kind, which is totally fine. But, I'm very used to it, obviously.
Yeah, you stand out, right? I mean, you stand out in Japan.
Right. Yeah. So
not many naturally blonde, people in Japan, right?
Right. Yeah. Even though I have to say, this trip back to Tokyo was crazy, the amount of tourism that's going on there right now.
Okay.
Absolutely insane. Like I grew up in, the area of Tokyo where, a lot of people might know it. It's like Shibuya and Harajuku. So it's very, very central. It's where a lot of the pop culture, like music, movies, a lot of stuff that you see in the TVs or, big screen, that's always televised around that area. They film around that area all the time. But it was insane how many tourists was there. It's like, oh, wow, if I had grown up around this time, it would have been a completely different experience probably, but yeah.
So that has kind of boomed or changed recently. I mean, I'm assuming it wasn't that way as you were
So
younger.
much. Yeah,
Okay.
when I was growing up, absolutely not. And when we first moved to Japan, actually, we were living in the northern part of Japan,
Hmm.
which is called Sendai. It's right around where the epicenter of the earthquake and tsunami was in
Okay. Yeah.
2011,
That's so
near the
tragic.
Fukushima, nuclear reactor. So I lived there for 3 years. My dad was a professor of linguistics, and he
Okay.
was, at that time, he was teaching at a Japanese private university in Sendai. So yeah, there definitely were not very many, as they call gaijin, but foreigners in
Gaijin.
Japan during
Okay.
that time. Yeah, yeah.
Gaijin. All right, that's my word for the day. I've learned one. That's my goal. I want to
Yes.
see how many Japanese words I can pick up here in our
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I love learning everything. I mean, that's why I love doing this. I'm like,
Yeah,
the films you ran, I hadn't seen them, so I'm like, oh, I want to watch those. So I just absorb
yeah.
those, and I get, fun's a great question. So, when we get there, but all right. So you mentioned your dad was a linguist, so I'm assuming that's what took your family to Japan. I mean, he was teaching at different locations. Now he was teaching English there at.
He was teaching the science of English, like
Oh, okay.
pragmatics, and then people are always like, oh, tell me more. I'm like, I have no idea. That's my dad's thing. That's not my thing. But yeah, so he taught composition and the science kind of
Mm,
language. And so with him, it was usually more the students that were already majoring in English, but, he was teaching them a little bit more into the language, and how to
mhm.
write better and stuff like that, I guess. I don't know.
Well, that's I remember 11th and 12th grade English, Miss Barkus, and she was a
Oh,
stickler. I mean, but I use that so much, right? I mean, that's one of the things. I mean,
yeah.
math. I love math, but I use it some, but not. The English is like, oh, okay, how do you pronounce that? What's the
Yeah.
phonetics? Okay, where does the comma go? Where does the comma not go? And that's kind of a lost. I don't say it's lost. I'm sure there's a lot of people still
But it
studying.
kind of is a lost
It's
talent. I feel like, especially with, everyone abbreviating everything, and
yeah.
people texting. So I've noticed, and I'm quite honestly, it's a little bit of a pet peeve for me when I see people, I just worked with someone, I'm not going to mention the name or anything, but it was just like the English was, and this was a work scenario, but like the English was so, so casual. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, I have to say that probably has rubbed off on me a little bit, because my mom is also an English teacher. So I'm kind of
Okay.
doomed for life, I think.
No, that
Yeah.
I don't know that that's being doomed. Well, I guess maybe you're like a lot of nails on the chalkboard when you see that stuff and you're like, "Ugh," or
Yeah.
hear that stuff. So my, my
Exactly.
my wife is the same way. I mean, we both had the same English teacher, went to the same high school, and had the same teacher. And she's like when
Mm,
she sees it, she's like, ah. I send her
yeah.
everything. I said before I send this, read this or whatever. So she's my
Yeah.
proofreader, and she's a
Yeah.
great proofreader.
Nice.
All
Yeah.
right, so Dad was a linguist. You guys were traveling around. So you went the schools that you went to were they you know
International
in,
schools.
international schools? So that
Yeah.
they were teaching English there and Japanese, or
Yeah.
how does that? Okay,
Teaching English. So in elementary school, you have a little bit of Japanese, but honestly, it's not really, not that much. So, and then junior high, once you get to like the sixth grade level, usually it's, whatever language you pick. And so I actually did not really study very much Japanese throughout, you know, elementary, junior high, high school. It was really after I graduated from high school. And then a lot of interesting coincidences led to me starting radio at the age of 19. And then that was really when I started using my Japanese. But yeah, I didn't, people in an international school environment, everything is in English.
okay,
And the curriculum is in, and one of the reasons I think is because it's made so the people who are there, the graduates can move on and go to, if they want to, the U.S., U.S. college system, whatever, right? So, um, yeah, so we were very discouraged actually in using Japanese. Like if
Oh.
the school that I graduated from, if we used Japanese in the classes or whatever, then we would get fined. So, which,
So,
yeah, and it was only like 80 cents about. Or I guess, let me see. So it was like 100 yen. Yeah, which is about 80
oh,
cents now.
it wasn't points, it was money. They were taking money.
Yeah, which, 80 cents isn't a big deal
I don't know if you
now,
could
but
do
like
that
when
now.
you're a student, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So
80 cents. I mean, that's, it's not like 10 points from Hufflepuff. It's, give me some change out of your pocket,
no,
right?
exactly. Your allowance. Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting that they discouraged Japanese. But so that was
Yeah.
run. I mean, it wasn't necessarily run by the Japanese government, or it was. I mean,
No, it
it
was a
was
private school.
private schools. Okay. Okay. So, were there Japanese students in there as well, or was it
Yeah,
mainly?
absolutely.
Okay. So you had a
Yes.
mix.
So yeah, there were a lot. And I actually went to two international schools in Tokyo. I went to a very, very small school when I was first in Sendai, right, which is where we
Hmm.
first lived, which is even, less foreigners, obviously. So that was like a one room school. And actually, during that time, that was the only time really I think that I kind of studied Japanese. But it was very, it wasn't a very organized. I don't know. It was because it was a one room school, so we had a few teachers for like the whole school basically.
Oh, nice.
And then from fourth grade on, I went to a school called American School in Japan, ASIJ, which is probably the biggest international school in Japan. It's been around for a very long time. That's actually where quite a few of the Japanese pop singers come from.
Okay.
A lot of the people that are in entertainment, one of the reasons that Japanese parents will put their kids in an international school is because they are a lot more flexible when,
Mm,
their kid needs to take a week off for like filming or recording an album or doing whatever, so they
yeah,
are much better
that makes
about
sense.
working with the kids on that. The Japanese school system is very unforgiving really with that kind of thing, especially back then. I don't know how it is now, but I'm assuming it's not too different. So yes, we had like, I don't know if you know who Utada Hikaru is. She's probably one of the biggest Japanese pop queens around,
Okay, I'm gonna
and
have to look
she
that
went
up.
to my school. I was, a little bit older than her, but so I went there, and there were quite a few Japanese that were going to school then at that school, and then also at the school that I graduated from, which is called Christian Academy in Japan, and that was once more a lot of kids from, and you have a, once more using this word hodgepodge, but you have kids who are like embassy kids. You also have kids who are kids of expats, and then missionaries, and then also Japanese kids who their parents wanted them to eventually go to school, college in the US, and so they wanted to put their kids in the
Okay.
international school environment. Yeah.
Very, very fascinating. I mean, you don't realize all that, and it's interesting to me to hear all that too. I love going down that route and hearing those stories. So, is it right to say so? Japanese language versus English. I mean, Japanese is very high context. You got to know a lot of the history and culture in Japanese to understand a lot of it. Where English is less so. I mean, is that a true statement? So, is it easier?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's easier in English. I think it's just different because I know that I've done a lot of work with, when I was still living in Japan, I worked with the Grammys and the Academy Awards with the it's a satellite company called Wow Wow, and they're the ones that own the license to the Grammys and the Academy Awards every
Okay.
year. So I was like the subtitle consultant, and
Okay.
I helped with all the pop culture references and everything. And
Ah.
there's a lot that we kind of don't realize because, English is what we use every day. But there's a lot of stuff I feel like in the English language is very culture related or very pop culture related. And so it's harder for someone, picking it up. And so I think you see that on both sides. You see that in English and you see that in Japanese. But
So it's probably
yeah,
balanced. Probably balanced. So
yeah,
it helps to know the
yeah,
culture of both languages to understand the language fully, which is
yeah,
why it's nice to be immersed in Japan when you're learning Japanese because you're
correct.
learning the culture as
Absolutely.
well as the language. Very cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what where did you get the start in the entertainment and film industry? What was the the pivotal tipping point that's like, hey, I'm gonna go do this.
So I think I want to say that it kind of all started with music. I'm very much of a music person.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
fell in love with radio, you know, excuse me, when I was, oh, I don't know, 11 or 12. I discovered, the bases on, in Japan would uh air like Wolfman Jack and Charlie Tuna and Casey Casey,
Wolfman Jack.
and
This is
and
Casey
this will
Kasem.
kind of date me, I know, but
Well, I'm
I
right there with you.
loved, the top 40. Like
Yeah.
it was religion, it really was my church in a way. And I wouldn't miss it. So I think it all started with that. And then out of high school, I went for 1 year of college in the US to Tennessee, a very small, town in Tennessee. And I quickly realized that I was very different from everyone. I felt there was a lot of culture shock going on. So
Oh, I
I
bet.
was like, oh my gosh,
Small
who
town
am I?
Tennessee.
What
Yeah.
am I? Yeah, there's a lot of self discovery that I was like, okay, I need to figure things out. So basically, I went back to Japan and started working at a modeling agency as a manager. And it was just because I was bicultural and I could speak a little bit of Japanese. So I was going around taking these models who were much older than me. I was taking them to like their jobs and helping with and that was when I first started kind of using
Oh.
the Japanese language. And through that, I got contact. His name is Mr. Kobayashi, and he was doing a big campaign for a brand new radio station that was starting in Japan, and it was a really big deal. It was a very high budget project, right? And this is like in the bubble economy in Japan, which for those of you who don't know, so much money going on in Japan. This was like during the time when, everyone had a Japanese car. So there was money just being thrown around everywhere. Unfortunately, I was not part of that. I didn't intercept any money. But,
You weren't making
they were
cars then?
buying. I was not making cars and I was not getting bubbles.
Me
No.
neither. I didn't get any
Um,
bubble.
yeah. But it was, that's also when they were buying a lot of real estate and they were building golf courses everywhere. And, it was like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Um, and so they built this brand new radio station. And I happened to meet the guy who started it. And he was looking for bilingual, bicultural people. And, I had a meeting with him and he was like, oh, are you bilingual, bicultural? I was like, yes, yes. And then I got the job and I'm like, oh, shoot, I need to be bilingual and I need to be bilingual quick. So it was kind of one of those things. It's a pattern in my life. I'd like to say, yeah, I can do it. Oh, shoot, I need to figure out how to do it. Okay. Take it till you make it kind of thing. But that's kind of what led to me getting into the entertainment because I was in radio and at that time I was working as a staff. I was 19 working as a staff for the Morning Man in Tokyo. And I would go to work every morning, very early in the morning. Um, and I would see the morning man. His name is John Kabira. To this day, he's, a very, very good friend of mine, like an older brother
Nice.
to me. Um,
Those are
and I
good to
would
have.
watch. Those are great to have. Yes, yes. I love him to death. And I would watch him work and I'd be like, man, wouldn't it be great to be just immersed in music all day, every day, and for that to be your job? So I started kind of moonlighting and working with um, like a really small FM in Harajuku area, near where I lived, and it was called FM Banana, and I started doing
Banana.
FM Banana, and this
I
is back in
like
the
that.
day when, yeah,
I
it
like
was.
that. I like that.
And I don't even know how many people listened. That's kind of up for debate. But this is, just to show how old school it was. Like all of the commercials were on a tape, right? So we would have to like play the tape cassette recorder,
High tech.
and very, very high tech. Yes.
Okay, but before you go past,
Yeah.
what was your intro when you came on the radio? Give us your effing banana. What,
Oh,
what
there
would you say?
was
How did you introduce
no
yourself?
intro.
There was
There
no
was
intro.
no
You just
intro.
started
No.
talking.
Yeah. I was like, hi everyone, this is Lisle. I mean, but also this time, like I was just starting to learn how to talk
Yeah.
on the radio. I had no idea. And yeah, once more, that was a long time ago, so I kind of don't remember. But yeah, I don't think I mean, we literally would just start talking, and then just,
Nice.
um, but yeah, and so then that led to me getting auditions and then eventually getting a radio show on J-Wave. And it just kind of went from there. And I was in radio for a very long time. Being in radio, a lot of people hear your voice. And so I was called on by a agent that did a lot of video game stuff. And that's how I got into video
Okay.
games because they, contacted me and said, hey, we have these auditions. Are you interested? I'm like, yeah, of course. I had no idea even then, like, what all that was because I'm not really very much of a gamer. So I didn't really understand, and yeah, like, so it's just been, I mean, it's been an incredible ride. I'm very, very fortunate, I think, to have been part of some really cool projects. And yeah, it's been very awesome.
I love that story. I love hearing stories, and what I find there's some similarities. I mean, it's taking those steps, those bold steps. I mean, you saying, yeah, I'm bilingual. I mean, yeah, I mean, you may have been stretching a little bit, but you were confident that you could get there, right? I mean, it
I could
wasn't.
figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think you have to see opportunities and not be afraid to step into them. And I love that you did that. And I love the story. And I can't get off the effing banana. I love the effing banana. I would have
I
been.
know. It's so
I'm like, this
fun.
is Liesel. I've got a split. I would have been
Yeah,
all over the banana puns.
exactly. I know. Yeah.
Like, I love that. I love that. So from games and whatnot. I mean, Lost in Translation. I can't help but go there because I love that. So I had not seen that film, right? And you played the role of the sexy businesswoman.
Yes.
I love the title,
Yes.
the credit they gave you on that. And so this is Sofia Coppola's Oscar-winning film, right? I mean, and this
Yeah.
this film was like 133 nominations as it toured the film festivals and 97 wins. So I mean, what an
Wow.
incredible
Didn't
run
know
for that
that.
film. I mean, I
Yeah.
pulled that up on IMDb, and so it's the story of this unlikely friendship, right? So
Right.
Bill Murray
Yes.
plays
Yes.
a lonely movie star who reluctantly goes
Who's
to
stuck in Japan?
yeah, he goes to Japan to film
Yep.
a commercial, right? A commercial,
Yeah.
and there he meets a very young, a really young Scarlet Johansson, who's tagging along with her, famous photographer boyfriend, and they're both find themselves in this town, strangers in a strange town, and they make this connection, and I love that the connection, like, it transcends age. I mean, they just have this bond, and it's a beautiful story. I really enjoyed it. So I'm curious, how did you land that role? I mean, how did that come about?
So there's a very interesting relationship for me with that movie, Lost in Translation. And this is one of those things again where you just can't make this stuff up. But that movie, Lost in Translation, is based on Sofia Coppola's life, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So she used to be married to Spike Jonze, a
Okay.
very famous film director, but also commercial director.
Mm-hmm.
And she would go to Japan all the time with him because he was constantly going over to Japan and directing very high profile commercials. Once more, kind of part of that low about the end of the bubble era, like he was coming out and even like music videos. Like I think he did stuff with like the Beastie Boys and there were a lot of music videos. So he was going over Japan all the time. So during that time of her life, that is a slice of life into Sofia Coppola's life, right? When
Okay,
she was
interesting.
younger.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And I actually met her during that time of her life.
Okay.
Completely different situation where when I was doing the radio and, I was also doing a lot of TV work in Tokyo. And I worked with a TV show called Countdown TV, and I think it was on every Saturday night, or I don't know, early Sunday morning or something like that. And it was a show that would feature a lot of international artists. There'd be interviews with artists. So I did a lot of the artist interviews for that TV show. And, everyone from the Backstreet Boys
Oh,
to
cool.
Shaka Khan
That's a
to,
throwback.
yeah, it was like a really cool mix. It was an amazing time, but one of the people that I interviewed was an American band that are now not together anymore, but they're called Sonic Youth. They're
Not
a
familiar.
husband wife. Yeah,
Okay.
they're kind of punk rock.
Okay.
They're definitely the not I don't want to say godfathers, but they really helped kind of create the whole punk rock scene, from the 80s. So they're, Thurston Moore, Kim Gordon, a husband wife duo, and they were in Japan promoting I think their 10th album, maybe, at that time. And they were also there to do a couple live shows. And so I was doing an interview for Countdown TV with Sonic Youth, right? So sitting down, and I always have my spiel that I do when I interview, because like you, I do a
Yep.
lot of interviews with people. And, so we're doing the interview and then all of us, at a hotel. And then all of a sudden there's like a knock on the door and then this woman like bounces in. She's like, "Hi guys, can I like hang out with you? I don't really have anything to do right now." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, who is this obnoxious person?" Like, because she completely like destroyed, I had kind of, we were doing an interview. We were on like a good, synergy and everything was going really well. And then all of a sudden, she just, bounces in.
Holy
So I'm
interruption. Yep.
like, yep. And, and then, but anyway, so we finish the interview and then I'm walking out the door with the, TV crew. And I'm like, who was that chick, man? And then so obnoxious. And they're like, "Oh, that was Sofia Coppola's son."
Oh,
And I was
you're like,
like, "Oh, I see. Okay." And then
hello.
fast, yeah. So then fast forward, and that was, the only time that I met her. And then fast forward to 10 years later, and I get a call from an agency that I sometimes did some work with. And they were like, "Lisle, there's a new Bill Murray movie that's going to be filmed in Japan. There are two roles, speaking roles, that we're casting. They're being cast, here. And we would like you to go in for one, for the sexy business one, right?" So I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, okay." I just thought, I was like, "There's no way, whatever. Mm-mm. Yeah, I'm not gonna get it." And then And then maybe like a day or two later, I'm shopping at my local grocery store. And I walk in and I go by the produce area. I'm like, oh, Sofia Coppola. Well, wouldn't you know? And she's like shopping, but I still don't put the two and two, together, right? So I'm just like, that's interesting, Okay, she's here. Gotcha. And then I, go back home, and then I get to the audition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I go in. It was a cattle call. There were like so many people there. Every agency had sent people in, right? And so I'm thinking, oh, there's just no way I'm gonna get this. So I go in, and then they take a few Polaroids, and then I'm getting ready to leave, and someone taps me on the shoulder, and they're like, Lisa-san, can we take a few more pictures? I'm like, yeah, sure, okay. And so they kind of take me to the side. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes Sofia Coppola. And I'm like, what? What just happened? Oh, that's why you were at my grocery store. Okay.
She was
Things are making
stalking
sense.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Well,
just
I mean,
happenstance.
yeah, it was
She was in
just
town.
like
Okay.
crazy. Yeah, she was in town. And then that's when I was like, oh, okay. So that's why she's here. And so they took a few more pictures. I still didn't think I was going to get it, and so I go back home and I kind of forget about it. And then, of course, this is one thing about this agency that I worked with. Like, a lot of times I don't know what it is, but they would forget to let you know if you got the audition.
Oh, by the way,
It's crazy. Yeah, exactly.
where are
And
you at?
or it's like, oh, by the way, you got the job. I'm like, what? How come you did? I mean, that's exactly what happened. Like, they called me for, I think a few weeks later, they called me for another job.
Mm-hmm.
So I called them about that, and they're like, "Oh, congratulations, by the way." I'm like, "On what?" And they're like, "Oh, you got that film." I'm like, why didn't you guys tell me?"
Holy cow!
So that's kind of
That's
how it
crazy. That
started.
is crazy.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like, by the
But
way, you have a scene with Bill Murray. I mean, come on.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, why? You guys should have told me, because I didn't even know when it was. I mean, yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, and then I get to the film set, and we filmed at Park Hyatt, which is a really high end, beautiful hotel in Shinjuku. And I get there, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is going to be so interesting, because I've met Sofia Coppola, and I just remember that 10 years ago, Sofia Coppola, right? That was so young and just like, hi, So I'm thinking, I wonder what it's going to be like on the set. And of course, she had like matured, right? She was a lot older, and she'd experienced a lot more. And, apparently, later on, I read some interviews that said that, from her earlier days and then Lost in Translation. Like, she had been in Godfather 3, so she'd been knocked down quite a bit from, like, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, you're terrible. Why were you in Godfather 3? It's just because your dad's Francis Ford Coppola. There's all kinds. So basically, I think life had knocked her down a little bit, and, she matured. And anyway, she was fabulous to work with on the Lost in Translation set. It was really cool, of course, obviously, to be with, Bill Murray. I mean, I grew up in Japan, so I don't have that image of him with Saturday Night Live. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people do, and I just know him as being like from Ghostbusters, and like, a lot of these films that I was able to watch in Japan.
Yeah,
But
just Ghostbusters, right? Just Ghostbusters. I mean, come on.
probably at
That's
the end of the
huge.
day,
Ghostbusters is
yeah,
huge.
it's huge. Yeah.
It's huge.
So yeah, so it was a really cool set to be a part of. And she's very quite she's quiet, or reserved, maybe is maybe a better word. I mean, she allowed Bill Murray to do quite a bit of improvisation, on set as well. And so watching a lot of that was really cool as well. Like, she came up, when I had to go do my part, which was also another thing, because it's like sexy businesswoman on
Yeah,
set.
that's why.
And,
It's like,
I'm
well,
like,
I mean, why did they? I mean, sexy businesswoman. I mean, they could have just businesswoman, right? I mean, but it's
I
good
know.
and it fit. But I mean,
Yeah, especially because people are looking at me like, why do you think you're sexy businesswoman? I'm like, I didn't come up with the name. It's not me,
no,
like they
no. But I
like,
mean, it fit. I mean, it did. But still, I mean, it's
yeah.
like, well, give her a name.
Yeah, it was, but and so when I came on set, she was like, these are the lines that I want from you, but they don't need to be the same. Like you can improvise, totally fine. And I'm like,
That's
oh, okay,
great.
cool. So, yes, we got to do that. And then obviously working with Bill Murray was really amazing.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Yeah, like so much great energy. The Lost in Translation film was shot in a very short amount of time. I believe it was only like 2.5 weeks
Holy cow!
that they were given, yeah, to do
Holy
a
cow!
film, and
That sounds like a lot, but it is not. It is not. I mean,
not at all.
no, I
Yeah,
mean,
not with all
especially
the
for a
shots that
feature
you have to
film
do.
and with that many
Yeah,
shots, yeah, holy cow!
yeah.
So I mean, Bill, your scene was with Bill, right? I mean, and the lines you
Yes,
delivered.
my
I mean,
scenes were with Bill. Yeah,
and what?
and
Go ahead, go ahead.
oh, yeah, basically, I am a businesswoman who
Hmm.
is in Tokyo for work and staying at the same hotel. And so I walk out of the hotel lobby bathroom. That's my first scene where I walk out and I notice that he's on the house phone trying to get a hold of Scarlett Johansson. And so I look and I'm like, oh, huh. Kind of like, oh, I recognize you. And then I keep walking, right? And then the next scene is where he's in the lobby with his client, waiting for Scarlett Johansson. And then I actually go up and start talking to him,
Yeah.
like, oh, excuse me, aren't you Bob Harris? Oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan of yours. And I just kind
Oh,
of go on and on. Yeah.
and you
So
nailed it. I
basically,
remember that.
yeah. So basically, I just went on until he interrupted me and said, no, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, he didn't say that. He said, well, I'm waiting for someone. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then I just leave kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, even though during that time, like even on set, it was very obvious that this was going to be an important film. A lot of people knew that this was based on Sofia Coppola's, her life story. And she was very adamant about getting Bill Murray. She, you know, uh, really worked hard. And, if I don't know if this is still true, but from what I understand, Bill Murray doesn't like to carry cell phones, so he doesn't have a cell phone.
I've
So
heard that. I've heard that.
so if you want to get a hold of him, you have to like send some faxes and try to
Leave
really
a
wine and
message
dine,
somewhere
yeah,
and hope that he
and
shows up and hope.
hope that he even decides he's interested. So she did do a lot of that, and so it was a really special film, I think, also, because this was going to be the big debut, really, for Scarlett Johansson, even though she's been, a child actor
Yeah.
for a long
She started
time.
very young.
Yes, and so of course her mom was there as well, but everyone kind of knew that this was going to be her really big break, and so yeah, it was really cool to be a part of that and kind of see everything that goes on, with a film like that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. What a highlight. I mean, I bet that was an absolute blast. So I'm curious. I mean, Bill, was he just, business as usual, or was he like, cracking up, making people laugh?
Cracking up.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was both, but I mean, to be fair, because once more they were on a very, very hard schedule. And so, and it was a mix of a lot of local crew that they hired in Tokyo. But then some key players, of course, that came in from the US as well. And basically, during the day, they would shoot a lot of the city
Hmm.
scenes, like in the hotel, like in the hospital, like whatever, or in the city. And then at night, they would have to shoot all the scenes in the hotel, because Park Hyatt is a very high end, very exclusive, expensive
Okay.
hotel. And the one agreement, the one thing that they said, in order, if you guys are going to film at our hotel, you can only do it in the middle of the night, right? So my scenes were filmed like in the middle of the night, early morning, and then we had to stop. Um, so because of that, I mean, they were doing, they were clocking ridiculous hours, right?
Oh, I
And
bet.
so
I bet.
I'm sure, yeah, the crew was very exhausted, and Bill Murray was very, very business when it needed to be business, but also, like joking around and trying to engage and trying to get everyone to really kind of laugh and, stay engaged in the project, wake him up, kind of thing. Like he was great. I mean,
Mm,
really wonderful to see.
yeah.
Yeah.
I bet what an amazing, scene partner. I mean, to have. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably couldn't ask for much better. Very cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that you have that experience, and I love hearing all about it. So um, let's jump over to Kamataki. Am I saying that right? Kamataki.
Yes. Kamataki, which was
Kamataki.
another huge jump for me. Like I think I
Well,
mentioned earlier that one of the things that I do is, an opportunity will come along and I'm like, way over my head. Okay. Yep. Let's jump and figure it out and make it happen. And that was another one of those, I think.
well, it's important if you're not if you don't feel a little apprehensive or a little like a little fear in there, then you're not challenging yourself and you're not growing, right? I mean, you should be
Right.
doing that. So I think it's awesome that you did that. I mean, so you played Rita, right, in the film.
Rita. Mm-hmm.
Rita, and
Yeah.
Rita is an apprentice of uh, Takuma. Am I saying that right?
Takuma.
Takuma.
Yes.
Takuma. Now,
Takuma.
and
Yeah.
he is a master potter,
Pottery
potter,
master.
pottery
Yes.
pottery master. Okay, and the
Yeah.
story is the story of Ken, which is Takuma's suicidal nephew who leaves Canada. His mom sends him from Canada to Japan to come stay with his uncle, to try and figure things out. And while Ken's there, I mean, he discovers the beauty of pottery. And the process, he finds new meaning, for life. I found it streaming on Vimeo. I wouldn't search for it. I was like, oh, I want to watch that because I mean, it was just reading the synopsis. I'm like, that sounds like such a great film. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, and that it highlights the importance of the traditional process. I mean, I remember the one scene with the potential apprentice that came over, and he's like, why are you taking days to do this? Why are you doing it this way? There's so much faster ways. And he does that. He starts pouring that teacup, and it's like, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about the process, right? I mean, too many things are automated today, and I think we are missing out on those lessons from doing certain things like that. So it's really important to me to stay creative. So is that I'm curious, is the artisan lifestyle, is that pretty common in Japan, or is that kind of like here? I mean, we have artisans, but
It's a dying. It
is it?
definitely is a dying profession, but I think that people are now realizing, even more so with all the tourism that's coming to Japan, they're realizing that we have to really keep this going, and so they're trying to keep those trades and the tradespeople coming. Thank goodness, you'll see some young kids that are like, "Oh, I want to do kimono making," or "I want to do sword making," or So you are definitely seeing, some of the young generation starting to take a little bit of an interest in that and maybe getting into that. But yeah, it's hard because I think, I mean, like you said, it's a very slow moving, probably sometimes extremely frustrating thing to be doing, because you have to be patient, and this is one of the things, like you mentioned with Ken, where he's like, we can do it so much quicker. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's a natural reaction. But I think that, once more, kind of going back to that teacup episode where it's
Hmm.
like your cup is full, and, um, yeah, there's definitely more emphasis, I think, on, trying to maintain a lot of the Japanese cultural aspects that have made Japan so coveted by so many people all over the world and, so fascinating. And so there are a lot more, I do think that they're trying to keep that aspect of Japan going. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not as much, and I love that it's not as much about the cup or the pottery, but as the process. And I mean, when the firing happened, how they had a gathering and they did this kind of ritual around it and all that in the film, and I thought they're really highlighting the process. Um, so speaking of the firing, all right, so so Kamataki, that's the word for the person that would tend the fire, that would stoke and chop the wood. Is that correct?
Kamataki, I believe, is like the word kamayaki. It's like, oh, oh no, I'm like kind of having a brain fart, but I think
I
it's
have those
like
all the time.
actually, yeah,
Thank God they
I
don't
think it's,
stink.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, no, I believe it's kama, right? Is
Mhm.
kiln,
Okay.
yaki,
Hmm.
which means to bake inside.
Okay. So it's the process. So it's
Yeah, the
the
process.
firing process. Okay. And so
Yeah,
that was your job as an apprentice. You were cutting the wood, you were stoking the fire, working the kiln, and that kiln process. I mean, in the film, it took days. I mean, it was multiple days. Um, and that kiln's massive. I mean, you think of a pottery kiln today, and it looks like about the size of a dishwasher, right? And you just load stuff into it. But this was
no,
like,
yeah, it was so
I mean,
big. I could
you
like
you
fit
were
in,
you were you were inside there loading pots, and he was
Correct.
sticking his head in, there, and then when you guys started
Yeah.
stoking that, so I'm curious, in filming that, did they have? I mean, did they do an actual firing? I mean, that was a legit kiln, or was that? I
It
mean,
was a legit kiln. Yeah. And the whole kind of backstory to Kamataki is also, like I, mentioned about like jumping into something, but that whole movie casting had actually been done in Canada, and the person that was going to play Rita was already decided. She was an actress coming in from Canada.
okay,
And then last minute, she decided she didn't want to do it. And so she canceled. And yet it's a small budget film, So they were in Japan. They had already done all their location scouting and they were getting ready to film in like, I think 3 weeks or something.
oh, holy
And
cow,
they
yeah,
lost one of their big roles. And so I had I had worked with someone doing a completely different project. And that person reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's someone that's casting for a movie role. Are you interested in being the director? I think you would be great." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever." So I literally met with him the next day, and it was Claude Gagnon,
yep,
the director of Kamataki, and he said, we need to cast this ASAP. I know this isn't very much time, but I need to know if you're interested within 24 hours. And so he gave me the script, and I went home and I read it, and it felt, I was, I could really relate to a lot of the things I think
mm-hmm.
that Rita was going through. Um, and so it really spoke to me. And so I met with him the next day for coffee and I said, "Yep, I'm in. I'll do it."
Nice,
And, it was the only thing about it that was a little bit hard on me was I had a radio show that I was doing every Sunday, and it was a live show in Tokyo. So I had to do this whole go film for 2 days, 3 days, and then come back to Tokyo. And I had to do that every week.
oh wow, okay,
So it was a pretty intense process for, I think, about a week and a half or whatever. I mean, not week and a half, a month and a half. I think it was 6 to 8 weeks we were doing that. But it was another extremely fascinating, very much of a learning experience for me. Like we did spend the first week learning about the kiln and how to work with the
Okay, I was going
kiln,
to
and
ask you that.
so
Training.
I was trained. Yeah, absolutely. And Fuji Tatsuya, the uncle Takuma,
Okay.
is and what's really cool is that he recently was in the news for winning an award at one of the big international film festivals. I forget which one, but he is just an
Oh yeah, his role.
incredible guy.
He was great. He was
Yeah,
great.
he's so amazing. So it was almost like having a dad role. He really was a mentor, in that aspect. And when we weren't filming, he would tell us so many amazing stories. And me and Ken would just listen,
Oh
to
wow,
him for like hours. It was really, yeah. And the filming was
masterclass right
done,
there.
yeah, totally, totally. Um, and so, yeah, it was a really cool, I mean, oh, yeah, it's something that I'm very proud of. And never thought, it's not whether it's, people like, oh, so you've been in two films. Is that, do you consider yourself to be an actress? And I'm like, no, not really. It's just those projects, I feel like they kind of picked me. And I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to do it, but like even, and I feel even with a lot of the voice work that I do and everything, I I'm one of those people where I don't like to just do one thing. Like I feel like everything synergizes with life experience, and
Hmm.
it's all about, like you said, like it's all about challenging yourself and learning, and um, and so I try to do that with almost everything I do. And so I'm just very lucky that I've had some really cool things like Kamataki and Lost in Translation and a lot of the video game stuff too. But yeah, Kamataki was definitely a favorite of mine. It was really a great experience.
Well, it was definitely a fun film to watch. I enjoyed watching it. And thought-provoking film. I mean, there were a couple aspects that I still am pondering and want to talk about those for a second. But I mean, so you had some. I mean, it was a big role, right? I mean, it was a big part.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
was that like I mean your first big role with that big of a
yeah,
role? Wow. So
yeah.
that, I mean, you must have really been feeling it's like the jitters on that one. I mean, I know I would have been.
Yeah, yeah. And I think though too, in some ways, because everything happened so quickly, I didn't have time to think of it. So I just literally had to jump in and kind of tread water and figure it out as I go, So
You did a
I
great
almost,
job treading water. I mean,
yeah,
you totally looked like you
thank
were
you.
swimming to me. So
Yeah.
no signs of struggling there. I would not have thrown a life preserver. So I mean, you did a great job. I mean, and you had some, what, especially for like first time, you had some tough scenes in there that I remember. I mean,
Like a shower
yeah,
scene
you
and
had the
like a
shower
love
scene.
scene.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I
I
mean,
was like,
do they have intimacy coordinators over there? I mean, as well.
no,
Okay. So,
no.
I'm a an amateur actor and do and I'm like I'm waiting for that. Now we have the meeting with the intimacy coordinator. I'm like, and it's
Yeah,
like I'm like,
no.
honey, are you going to be
Yeah,
okay with stuff like that? And she's like, we'll deal with it when we get there. Okay, okay,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, especially with the love scene, I remember, and I was always like, oh, maybe he'll like write it out. Maybe it won't happen. I kept hoping, but then of course, Claude is French. So he's like, oh no, the love
Well, and,
scene. I'm
and
like,
and from
oh
what I
my
read on
God.
Claude, he likes to. I mean, he wants to push that envelope, make you think,
Oh,
push
completely.
push the social norms, and that's kind of where I wanted to go next. I was like, okay, so and you have in correct me, are these the two halves, right? Are they was that a pot or a pipe that was halved in two? Do you remember what I'm talking about in the movie? So Ken, when he's let me lay it out. So Ken, when he first gets over there, one of the nights he's sitting outside and he looks over and it's like a little alcove over there, and there's these
Yeah.
two halves, and to me it looks like a pipe, but I think they're two pottery halves. It reminds me
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah, yeah, yeah,
reminds
yeah,
me
yeah,
of
yeah.
the pipe from like Donkey Kong or whatever, or
Oh,
Mario that they come up and out of, but it's
we're-
split in half, so there's two pieces to it. And so one night
yeah.
it's like this, and another night
Yes, yes,
they're
yes, yes,
juxtaposed
yes,
to each
yes.
other. And
Yes, yes,
so
that's right.
he asked, one morning. I mean, so we see several scenes in this. So one morning he asked his uncle. He's like, what's the deal with the pipes? And of course the uncle looks over at his wife, right? And he's asking about the pipes, and so they just kind of smile and go on. But and you have to understand the dynamic of the group there, because you have the uncle, right?
Takuma.
Takuma. You have the uncle. You have his wife, and all living in the house. You have Ken living in the house. Rita, she comes and goes, right? Then you have Sensei, and that's so who is she? She is for some reason I had in my mind she was like Takuma's the widow of his master or something like that, because there was another woman living there, right?
Yes,
an older woman living there as well.
Yeah.
And then so one night he discovers what the story behind the
pipes,
the pipes,
Yeah.
And what it is the Sensei. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Sensei. So she when she how do I put this, when she has needs, right? She will put the pipe in a certain orientation, and that's like,
right.
That's like that's her bat signal, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
Or you can take it, that's, it's all like Donkey Kong, whatever. You can keep it in the Donkey Kong mentality. And so he discovers that's her siren call. But even what's more interesting is who's answering the call. It's his uncle that's answering the call. And so I'm like, wait a minute.
Bizarre.
I'm like,
I know.
His wife knows about it. They were smiling about it. And I'm like,
which in a way, like if you know Japan and kind of,
that's what I was going to ask you. How's it viewed in Japanese culture, right? I mean,
so I think, like, this is going to sound weird, but in a way, that's a very Japanese thing. It's kind of a Japanese approach, right? For them, the whole idea of intimacy is how I'm going to put it. Is a lot of times much more about a need, and there's not as much emotion sometimes to it. There's a lot of things that have go on and sometimes go on in Japanese culture that, say, Americans would be like, what? That's really weird. That's twisted.
Well, yeah.
But, in Japan, it's like, well, it's almost like more of a practical thing, I think, is what they think. And so to me, that is reminiscent of that, even though it's weird, like, absolutely. I know when I first read that part, I was like, what? Oh boy, here we go, but I was like, oh, Claude.
Well, I like that because it gets you thinking, right? And it got me thinking. I mean, I'm like, okay, so what is it? What's the takeaway here? What I mean, and I think for me, part of it was, you need to stay open. I mean, because there are cultural differences, and I mean, is staying open, looking at it, to us, in the Western world, I mean, with our, marriage and relationships, that, that wouldn't be acceptable because it's we're not on the same plane with that mentality, or that thought, and you're going to cause someone, hurt and anger, and you're going to hurt someone by doing that, right? But there, I mean, like you said, if they're seeing it as a, it's more of a fulfilling a practical need. That's a little different. I mean, I'm like, okay, and I also, it kind of, it demystifies it more, humanizes, Takuma, because, you don't see him. To me, it was kind of like, are you familiar with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You have Master Splinter there.
I've never watched it, but I'm familiar with it.
So they in the recent iteration, Master Splinter is he isn't this wise, all knowing all. He's a little more, he's like this freaked out dad. I mean, he's still really, still pretty cool, but he's like he's freaked out dad. He's humanized more, and I think that in maybe us as Western, we try to see these Japanese gurus or whatever, and that's really, I mean, he's a person. He's not with that can do things with human needs as well. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's that's where it is. But I was curious your take on it, so that helps a lot. I kind of thought that it would be something cultural, and I couldn't help but talk about it because I told my wife about it, and she's like, I I think we need to get a couple split pots, put on the shelf.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I
so,
totally forgot about that until you brought it up. I was like, oh my gosh, that's right.
well,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
gonna love this. She goes rummaging through the looking for something, and she comes out with a cup and a banana. She's like, when the banana's in the cup, it's time.
Yeah.
She's gonna kill me for sharing that. But oh well, that'll teach her.
Love it.
All right, so great movie. I mean, I hope everyone jump out there on Vimeo and watch that. I mean, I enjoyed watching it. All right,
Thank
so
you.
you've talked a lot about voiceover, and I definitely want to jump there. I mentioned I'm a casual gamer, so Nina and Christy from the Tekken franchise. All right, who, introduce everyone to the Tekken franchise. I mean, what is that? What do you what is that game, and then who are those characters?
Well, Tekken is a very big fighting game. Started off in the arcades, I think. Once more, I'm even
So
less
we're both in
of
the
a
same
gamer
boat.
than you. Exactly.
I think
But so, when I auditioned for it, I had absolutely no idea, because I didn't know Tekken. So I had no idea it was such a big video game. But yeah, I think it's, a huge video game. And Nina is a character. Nina was the first one that I played in the game. And Nina Williams is a very strong character. She's got a really cool backstory to her, I think. And so does Christy. Um, and both very different characters, though. And they all the characters have a certain fighting style that they use. So with Nina, it's Krav Maga.
okay.
I always, the
Krav McGraw. Yeah, I
Israeli
know.
fighting.
Yep, the Israeli
Yes,
fighting style.
Israeli
Got it.
fighting style. And then with Christy, it's capoeira, Brazilian style, martial arts. So, yeah, so their fighting styles are very different, characters are very different, but both, really cool parts and it was, yeah, incredible to be a part of the Tekken franchise. I didn't really understand how big it was until at the time I had my own website, personal website. And I started getting messages from people all over the world, like, oh my gosh, are you Nina Williams? Kind of
Oh,
thing. And I'm
sweet.
like, who are these people? I had no idea, no idea. So that was kind
That
of
is
when
so
I
cool.
really, discovered but then, also you mentioned Virtua Fighter
Mm-hmm.
too, with Sarah Bryant. I would say that probably 70%, maybe 60% of my video game work was done at Sega. So I did
Okay.
tons and tons and tons of work with Sega. Starting off with Crazy Taxi, I was in that, and that
Oh,
was
okay.
also a really, really fun project to be a part
I
of.
did not
And
realize
then
Crazy
Shenmue.
Taxi.
Yeah, so Crazy Taxi, Shenmue I was in, and which is it's amazing to me, the Shenmue community that is still very much alive. And I'm always getting messages, or they're like fan meetups and stuff with the Shenmue community, and
Oh,
it's
that's cool.
really cool. But yeah, so the video game thing was something that just was very unexpected. And yet, I'm so proud of that part of my career too. And especially because I feel like, like with Crazy Taxi, um it's like a lot of these very industry, like, respected, I feel like games, like I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think Crazy Taxi was very pivotal for the way they incorporated music into their,
I remember playing that game.
soundtrack. Yeah. And,
That's one
I
I
mean,
played a lot.
really,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember that one.
So
I got to look for you. I got to listen for you in there now.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. I want to say, even though that was definitely not my first video game, that was the first one that I really remember being in. And it kind of went on from there, But yeah, I still go to a lot of anime
Yeah, I was
conventions,
going to ask you that.
and yeah, and I get to meet a lot of the people that, have enjoyed my work through the years, and that's been really cool. And there was one guy who I think he bought a Crazy Taxi arcade game. He
Oh
found
yeah,
it somehow on like eBay or something. And so he actually sent me, like the part, like
the marquee,
basically it's,
the
yes, he
marquee. Yeah,
sent it to me to get it signed. And that
that's
was
cool.
kind of fun, but yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, anime. What a cool fan base, and the video game fan base. I mean, is a great fan base.
Yeah.
I'm a big geek. I love going to cons and conventions. I mean, you go to quite a few, right? I mean, you're uh, out and about. I'm sure doing that quite a bit. And yeah, I got to believe the fans are just amazing. I mean, I'm sure that's a highlight when you're out and about. I mean, just hearing the love, coming from all those folks that their appreciation for what you're doing, that creativity that you're pouring into those games. That's got to be awesome. That's got to be awesome. All right, let's Adventures of a Blonde Geisha. I want to jump over there for a few minutes because
Yes.
first more a comment. I mean, I listened to the I think it's your most recent, which was with was Japanese
With my
theater.
brother?
Well, no, it
Oh,
was one
with
before that.
Michael Neistat.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yes. Yes.
it was something he started talking about, and it ties into a previous interview I had just done. I think it's 3 interviews ago with Gary Schwartz. So he got talking about Viola Spolin and the her book Improv Games for the Theater. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something to pass along to him when you talk to him next. So Gary was basically Viola's protege, and we just interviewed him. But Gary. I mean, he worked with her and had known her for the last 20 years of his life. And he developed a website called Spolin Games Online that's kind of it's a companion to the book. So there's a lot of videos
Oh,
of them
cool.
doing and teaching the class and whatnot. But so something you might want to pass along to Michael. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I'll
he would
tell
enjoy it.
Michael about that.
Gary
Yeah.
Gary is a fantastic person. I just love him to death. He's I don't know if you probably don't remember the show Zoobly Zoo, but it was a kids
No,
show.
I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Great. I mean, he's a writer, author, actor. Started as a mime, believe it or not. Started as a mime,
Oh,
working up and
wow,
down the
cool.
Hudson River. Beautiful story. Anyway, share that with Michael. I'm sure he'll find that interesting. And then, so the Lost in Interpretation episode. You mentioned right off the bat that you came to Kansas City to cover a UFO story. So, being a Kansas Citian, I got to know the UFO
Yeah.
story. What was it? What was the deal on that? Do you
So that
remember?
was, yeah, I mean, I don't think that was too long ago. I think that was maybe like a month ago that we did that.
Really?
I mean, not a month ago, sorry, a year ago.
Okay. Well, still, that wasn't that long
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, it was not that long ago. So it was actually for a TV show because I think I mentioned I do a
Hmm.
lot of work with TV as well. And it was a lot of fun because this TV, so one of the things that, and I've done this a lot since moving to the US and being in LA, but a lot of times Japanese productions will, they're always scouring YouTube, everything like
Hmm.
Reddit, everything, like looking
Looking for news
for,
feeds.
you're right, exactly, like really cool, interesting, stories. And this was one of the stories. And so it was this guy in Kansas City who had all these cameras, he had some cameras outside, and they happened to catch, this UFO feed of like a UFO going zipping by his house.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, we went to go and talk to him. And I helped, and it was with a well-known Japanese comedian, usually with the reporting. Sometimes I'll do the reporting. Sometimes I will be kind of the bilingual assistant and help with like the interpreting and whatnot. But with this, it was like a well-known Japanese comedian who was doing the interview. And so I did the interpreting for it. But yeah, it was, I mean, everything is, it's so fascinating because we actually were in his house. And I think that, and stuff like, he still had his Christmas decorations up, and it was like at the end of January. And, for the Japanese, they don't understand that, right?
Okay.
Because it's like, for them, first of all, Christmas is not a traditional holiday, right? It's just one where it's like, oh, super fun. Let's go and have KFC chicken and let's have parties,
Okay.
Like there's no emotional kind of attachment to that holiday. So
Yeah.
they were like, oh, still has Christmas decorations, they're like all freaked out. And then just the communication, because this guy was, he was, I mean, very American. And so there was a lot of kind of interesting cultural miscommunications that happened throughout the interview I can't really talk about, but it was quite funny. I think that they were like, oh, so fascinating.
I think it's fascinating to me that they sent you to Kansas City for that, found a little UFO story. I wouldn't have guessed it. That's why,
Yeah.
A news outlet in Japan would want someone to come to Kansas City. I mean, I figure it would be Taylor Swift or something like that. Taylor Swift bought a jacket here or something like that right now. But
yeah,
that was funny when I saw that. I was like, oh, I got to find out more about that. So, I mean, how long were you in town for? I mean,
oh, literally only 2 days, I think, 2 or 3 days.
2 days. So long enough. Did you get some barbecue?
We did. We got some barbecue because, of course, and we also went to a really great cafe, and I don't remember the name of the cafe, but they had amazing brunch there.
There's a few of those downtown.
It's on my Instagram feed somewhere. Like I know I took pictures, but I mean, that's one of the great things I think about working in Japanese media over here in the US, even in LA. I've lived here now for about 13 years, but I've done a lot of work with Japanese production crews. And, what they'll do is they'll bring the TV crew over, but then they'll work with a local production team who's usually Japanese. And so we'll always have some kind of cool restaurant that we'll go to, or so I've learned so much about America, but then also about LA, even so many cool restaurants and places that I've learned about through working on these TV shows for Japan. It's kind of fascinating. Yeah.
So almost like for you, since you're there in LA, almost like a staycation, that you get to see things that you don't normally get to see because they're interested or fascinated by them in the media outlets over there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm obviously I'm working, but then also I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know about this place. Like one of the places, and this is totally through work because I had to do reporting on it, is a place called the Original Pantry, which is in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles.
Okay.
Not too far from like the Staples Center or crypto.com. That's what it's called now. So obnoxious. But, and the Original Pantry is this really cool diner that is, maybe about 7-minute walk. Not a 10-minute walk, not a 5-minute walk. But about 7-minute walk from. Yeah.
You timed it. You've timed it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yet a lot of the people that, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like a lot of the Hollywood set would go there after an awards show because there were no 24-hour diners or restaurants in downtown LA. So this is one of the few. But historically, it's also very relevant because apparently after Black Friday, the stock market crash and everything that happened, they stayed open and they were feeding people in the community for free because there were so many people that didn't, have money and they had lost so much. And so, I get to find out these really, because I mean, even though I'm American, obviously I didn't grow up here, so I don't know a lot of all this trivia, historical facts and everything. So I kind of get to learn with, some of the work that I do. And that's probably one of my favorite things, about doing the kind of work that I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Discovering as you're going along. That is great. I love it. Well, I enjoyed the podcast. One, I don't know if I need to look through all the episodes, but I would I would love to talk to you more about, actual traveling to Japan, or hear more about traveling to Japan. I mean, to me, I'm a Midwesterner. It's, I think it would be, I'd love to go and see, Tokyo, but I kind of want to see it not from, a tourist perspective, but, from, what it would like to be, living in, in Japan. I don't know if there's, experience that would facilitate that, but so would love to hear an episode about, hey, if you ever want to go to Japan, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. Cause
Mm,
it's on my
yeah,
list.
I should do that. Yeah. Yeah, because I do have several places that are my haunts, I like to call them, that I go every time I'm there. And I definitely have a very different experience, I think, obviously, than, the
Hmm.
tourist experience. Like, I don't, I mean, this sounds weird, but I don't really use the trains. I just, and the reason being, I like to, first of all, I kind of have a back problem, so I have to be careful with that. But, and a lot of the stations still only have these long
Oh, okay.
stairways. And
Well,
so
see, stuff like that's
I'm
good to
just,
know.
yeah, but another thing, like, and I really realized this past trip, so the one I just got back from, but when I was in Japan, when I was still living in Japan, I also mountain biked everywhere. So I
Oh, I bet
really
that was fun.
know
I
a
would
lot
love
of
to do
this.
that.
Yeah. And, I know a lot about the cities. So someone who doesn't, they will look on Google Maps and they'll be like, okay, so 3 trains. Oh, wow. This is like a 45-minute journey, right? But I will look at the what part of the city to the, from one part city to the next part of the city. I'm like, okay, by bike, that took about 25 minutes.
Okay.
So by cab, it takes about, so I have a much better sense, I think, of where things are located. And I'm like, yeah, no, 25 minutes. I'm doing cab, man. I'm not wasting another 25 minutes on it, which is kind of a snob thing to say.
No,
But I'm like,
no,
nope,
no.
I'm just, yeah, yeah. Um, so, there's that. But then also, I have like a few really good restaurants that I go to every
Mm,
time I'm in town. Um, and then, a few stores that I always like to stop at and see, what they have. And yeah, yeah. So I
mm.
should probably do a
Well,
Tokyo version. Yes.
I'm going to be looking for it because I mean, I would love to go over and see more, but I'm, it's more of like, I don't know that I need to know. I don't know that I know what I need to know to really enjoy the experience over
Right.
there. And if I'm going
Yeah.
to, I
You
mean,
don't know what you don't know,
yeah, and
Yeah.
before I invest the resources to going, I want to make sure that I enjoy it, right? I get out of it what I want to get out of it. So, you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would
And
be
there are a lot of
fascinating.
things that have, yeah, I think too, like people, because people do ask me a lot about planning a trip to Tokyo. And one of the panels that I do when I go to anime conventions, that I've been doing for a long time is Destination Tokyo.
Okay.
And that's basically about planning a trip to Tokyo and about how it doesn't have to be this daunting
Ooh.
experience. There's a lot of, and right now, with where the economy is, where the exchange rate is, and after, like, before the Olympics, there were a lot of hotel options. It really opened up because, of course, the Olympics ended up being kind of a disaster in a way because of COVID and everything. But the really good thing that happened from that is that now there are so many more lower end hotels that you can use and
Mm.
not pay so much, and so I mean, like 70-80 dollars for a hotel
Oh,
room
wow.
is not bad,
No,
I
no,
mean, better.
that's cheap. I mean,
That's so
for
cheap.
standards here, right? I
Yeah.
mean, uh, yeah, no, that's yeah, that would be so. So you mentioned you did on a panel. You had that conversation.
Yes.
Okay, do are
Yeah.
those panels out there anywhere recorded? That
I don't know.
okay,
Maybe
I may
I
have to dig
actually
around.
I have not checked. Yeah.
I may have to dig around, but I
And
would be interested
that's
in that.
yeah, and that's another reason that I started. the podcast really, which I haven't done in about 6 months. I need to get my butt back on
It's
that. It's like,
tough, right?
I'm going to
It's
take a
tough.
little,
I'm,
sabbatical, but yeah.
I'm,
Especially when you're traveling, it's really hard to
oh yeah.
kind of keep up, but one of the reasons for doing the Adventures of a Blonde Geisha is eventually I'd like to, write a book. And so I wanted to record a lot of these experiences that I've had. And also, I've learned a lot through hosting these panels about, there are a lot of people that are looking for, information about Japan and I mean, part of it, kind of going back to your first question about the third culture kid thing, I think that, um, I am very, very proud. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a third culture kid. And I think
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
so I like really talking about that and, also talking with other people who grew up as a third culture kid, and I think that we kind of have a unique aspect or POV of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important for people to experience, even if it's uncomfortable, to experience things culturally and learn about other cultures, learn about other countries, learn about people in, other, um, other parts of the world that you never even think about, So, yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I started that actually.
Good. I'm glad that you're doing it. I hope that you get some time in the future because I want to, there's some past ones I still need to go listen to, but I want to listen to them. And I encourage everyone, I mean, like and subscribe, get out there and listen to the podcast. I mean, it's a great podcast. I learned a lot and, even more than just the UFO in Kansas City. I mean, we got UFOs in Kansas City. What? But yeah, great.
I know. Thank
Wow.
you.
Wow. Well, this was so much fun. I enjoyed hearing all the stories and just getting to know you. I mean,
Thank
you're an
you.
awesome,
Thank you for
amazing
having
person.
me.
So
Thank you.
one big ask, and you can say no, it's all right. Can you give us a thanks for listening, like, share, and subscribe in Japanese?
Thanks for listening.
However you want
Okay.
to spin it.
So,
Let's hear it.
okay. 皆さん、今日聞いていただいてありがとうございました。またぜひ聞いてくださいね。よろしく。
You're amazing, Lisle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
have a
I
beautiful day.
appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Too.